Good afternoon, folks. If we can settle down, that'd be great. After my great planning, I gave you far too long at coffee, and we've gone miles over. That's okay. I'll just not do my synopsis at the end. As simple as that. It's fine. Okay, short communication session, this one. So we've got 5 talks of about 10 minutes each, with a bunch of speakers from all over. It's fantastic. Some really interesting stuff here. So we're going to start with Arnault Laudelout, who's project manager with Natagora in Belgium and is working on developing a Corncrake action plan in Wallonia in Belgium. So, yeah.
Thank you, and congratulations to the Corncrake Life project for bringing us together and holding this great event where we can talk a lot about our favorite species. So I will give you some insights on the situations of the Corncrake in Wallonia. Great. So that's the core area for the Corncrake in Wallonia. So that's the orange place where we have some clay soils. It's an area which is dominated by grasslands. There has been some systematic Corncrake searches conducted over there since the 1983. We know that the Corncrake has been present before that from occasional data from a few sightings every year, so we know that he has been over the place for centuries. And at the end of the last century, we had on average about 12 calling males per year, usually between 2 and 50, and sometimes up to 100 calling males. We believe that they were animals coming from the Eastern Europe. These populations allowed us to hold 2 live projects targeting Corncrakes, and also on the same area we had another live project which ended up 4 or 5 years ago, targeting other amidose species, amidose restorations. We have a lot of redback shrikes over there and other grassland specialists. There were a lot of efforts by Arnault and Natagora, which is just the same association that changed names, to create protected area in this region with a lot of support from the LIFE project and also from the regional governments. And so we have more than 1,000 hectares of meadows that are just now nature reserves, mainly located in 10 Natura 2000 area. So we are quite lucky, but the Corncrake situation isn't that good, so we can move on to the next slide. I don't know, I keep on pushing the wrong button. So the Corncrakes in our area are mostly attracted by wet meadows on alluvial soils near flush aquifers or just heavy clay soils. And drier meadows are used on rainy years. And the habitat ranges from orchid-rich unimproved meadows to heavily fertilized meadows with just a preference for intermediate levels of fertilizations. The birds can be seen on set-asides, into young conifer plantations made on meadows, and into extensive grazed meadows, grasslands. And the proportions of birds into each type of habitat varies quite a lot from year to year. And on years where we had a lot of Corncrakes, they are more into meadows with intermediate levels of fertilizations, but on lower density year, they tend to be more into set-asides. So we can move on to the next slide. So this is the number of years with Corncrake data into each grid scale. So the yellow dots are just places where we had one calling male or several calling males per grid. So the yellow ones were used 1 year. The darker the color, the more years they tend to be used. So that's for the period 2009-2023. So that's just our core area there, highlighted by the green area. So you see also in Flanders, there are some spots that are regularly used by corncrakes, but also a lot of animals that just pop up 1 year and are never be seen again in the same region or into the same reserves or grasslands. So the next slide is the situation for the last 5 years. So last year was the worst nightmares of corncrake lovers, so we had no one. And also what we see is that in our core area, the situation is not really, worrying. So we have no returning animals. The search intensity varies quite a lot from year to year. We had a lot of volunteers that put up energy to search for corncrake. Some of them tend to get old and are not so active, and in the future we have some plans to help them to search corncrake with some paid staff searches regularly done, at least for the 4 or 5 next years, thanks to a new strategic life project, which is the Belgium for Biodiversity Life project. So we can go to the next slide. So that's the census data in the year 1983 to 1989 in the western part of our area. So you see some dots spread all over the landscapes, and if we go to the next slides, we have the data from the years 2009-2023 that are in blue. So what we can see is that some area have been totally lost for corncrakes, and other ones were quite heavily used, and it's very likely that there are some explanation in the landscapes that are behind this. For example, in the right circle, there has been a lot of drainage and intensification, so the corncrakes appears to have totally lost there, and on other ones it's getting better. So the next slides. So there are some main drivers of behind this that have been changing from the 1980s till now. For example, the drainage has been a problem in some area. Now, thanks to Natura 2000s, it's not allowed in Natura 2000 area anymore. And also the farmers with the dry years we had for the last 3 or 4 years, they probably think twice about before draining grasslands, because the fodder production has been very difficult during these dry years. So it's further pressure on corncrakes, because if we find corncrakes and try to go to talk with the farmer, we have we feel that he is really in need for fodder, and as all the farmers from the area have the same problem, it's very difficult for them to find solutions and to find how to feed their cows for the dry, for the hard season, for the winters. So the climate has been changing. We had the dry spring, dry years. We also had some dramatic rains in 2021, which also was a problem for farmers because the fodder production was very difficult. some conversions of grasslands towards arable land, globally more pressures for mowing and more and more mowing each year. So a Corncrake which has not been found by surveyors is likely to have totally failed breeding. In nature reserves, there are no any Natura 2000 area. Also, it's nearly impossible to put up fertilizers on grasslands, so the grasslands gets shorter, and it's probably not suitable anymore for the early breeders, so they have to go to fertilized grasslands where they fail. So the only solution for them to successfully breed is to go into these nature reserves where we have to find them. So that probably explains why we have such a low returning rate. Abandoned land are just totally gone, so no, thanks to the Natura 2000 and the PAC regulations, farmers have to mow their land each year, so another problem for Corncrakes. So brood protection mechanisms are quite insufficient because it's very difficult to protect a sufficient extent of land for the brood to be successful. And also we are not exactly sufficiently performant for Corncrake searches, so it's also our fault if we cannot find them. Thank you.
Thank you, Arnault. That's a very challenging situation. I'm sure we'll hear more from you. Next up is Ciaran Cronin, ecologist and detection dog handler with Wildeye, examining the use of detection dogs for Corncrake conservation in Ireland.
This is a fantastic conference. I'm loving it. I'm going to put my 18-minute talk. Yeah. So I am going. It is going to be fairly rapid fire. I was supposed to test the timing, but I went looking for Corncrakes instead. Sorry. So John approached us to try novel use of kind of wildlife detection dogs and a Corncrake conservation scenario. The three factors that we were initially kind of tasked with was to look at disturbance distances for Corncrakes. Could the dogs detect live Corncrakes, and could the dogs detect dead Corncrakes? Like I say, this is fast. There were an awful lot of constraints. Ultimately, we've had a lot of success, but a lot of difficulties along the way. We're limited to working with captive birds, which we've had great cooperation from Fota Wildlife Park, which is where the captive birds are, but it is a captive scenario. How that translates to real-world scenarios, we're not entirely sure. Bird welfare within that scenario has been very limiting at times, understandably and rightly so. And whether the sense that we're using, like I say, translate from training scenarios to real scenarios. The dog that we're using is Callie. She's a professional detection dog, English Springer Spaniel. These are the same level of training that you're going to find with a drug detection dog, bomb detection dogs. These are selected the same way, trained the same way, very highly proficient dogs. She's wonderful. She's very highly motivated for her target scent. So, this is all a game to her. She just wants a ball. That's Callie's focus is the ball. She will do anything for that, So our problem is to guide her in the right direction to get that ball. We try to use dogs with very individual characteristics that are suitable for the projects that we're working on. It's not always possible. In this case, Callie has an almost non-existent prey drive. So she will walk past wildlife and pay it no attention. She's not interested, but she is utterly interested in the ball in the game. Now, we're not going to rely on that. That's not something we put 100% faith in. She is a dog at the end of the day. She's a predator. But, it's very, very suitable for the project that we're using her for. She's also very sensitive. She likes to be close to me and respond to me, and that's, again, very useful. The first component of what we looked at were the disturbance distances. You can see the pens here, A to F, in the bottom left of the screen, similar to the pen storp slides that you saw earlier. We had birds in pens B, D, and F. Again, look, they say there's a lot of biases in here. These are captive birds. We acknowledge that completely. This is a very open scenario, so the birds could see us coming from a very long way away. So, you know, it's not strictly transferable to a wild scenario. In fact, it's probably more of a kind of a maximum disturbance distance. I think we could probably treat it in that zone. We did it using cameras, so time synchronized cameras in the 3 pens that had birds in them. Those birds were separated by empty pens and screens, so their behaviors didn't influence the adjacent bird. Then we came in, followed the blue line past these marker posts, and subsequently reviewed the footage, looking for disturbance events and using the time marker to assess the distance between the bird and the pen and the handler at that moment. It was very interesting. We have very limited time to show you any results here. The disturbances ranged from kind of early stage disturbances, a bird just being alert, basically kind of under, and suddenly, you know, pausing and looking up. Sometimes very difficult to tell that. That was happening around about 25 meters. A little bit of variability in there. The crouch response there that we thought was going to be a kind of an early stage response actually happened quite rarely and at very close distances. So the crouch response looks like it's possibly a more late stage response, which probably makes sense. You don't want to crouch down in dense grasslands. You can't see the predator anymore. And then you had the kind of run alert where the bird runs along and stops in the open and just checks again, or run and hide where it runs and hides. Yeah. It's all very self-explanatory. And if anyone needs my acting skills afterwards, just come and talk. The panic response was quite rare, but it was quite significant when it did happen. Those later stage responses in the region of kind of 5 to 15 meters. Again, like I say, open view here. Very interestingly, the recovery time, so that's the time from when I left the area with the dog, so that was me and the dog together, whether the birds are responding to one or the other, or the team, you know, is open for discussion. From the time I left the area till the time the birds resumed normal behavior was very, very quick. So generally 20 to 30 seconds after we were gone, birds were resuming their normal behavior, sometimes up to a minute, maybe 2. The second component, probably the central component of what we're doing, is looking at detection dogs finding live corncrakes. The big question here is, what scent do we train the dog on? Is it adults, is it nests, is it eggs, is it chicks? What scent do we use to train the dogs? And that's a lot more difficult than it might initially sound. So initially, the obvious choice, I suppose, would be an adult bird, and that would certainly be the easiest scent to train on. Certainly the most distinctive. There's a lot of scent involved there, easy to use adults. But you know, we looking at the individual characteristics of corncrakes, the ecology of corncrakes, their behavior, we assessed that this was actually going to be a very difficult scent and potentially dangerous. So if we have a dog in a field and it's trained to find adult corncrake, there could be a male in the field, there could be non-breeding birds, there could be a female off the nest moving through the fields. We don't even know the bird is there. And the dog is moving through the field, we're moving behind it, there's a risk of trampling a nest, various other things. So we assessed that that was not a viable route forward. Nests had their own problems, like we can talk about that in more detail later on. Chicks had very great difficulties as well. So we were kind of found ourselves forced into the use of eggs, which actually is quite a good source because it is a verifiable source. When the dog indicates, we can see that there's something there. It's a point source, it's not mobile. There are lots of other scents around there that can help guide us into that. And ultimately, it's the scent of the whole nest. It's the bird and the feathers and the feces and the chicks or the eggs. Everything is the scent that we're after, and that guides us in that direction. The best laid plans. You see what I did there? Yeah. That didn't work out. The birds didn't breed, or very few. There were very few eggs available to us. The area we had earmarked for training became unavailable. It was a failed effort. There were some eggs available, but very few, and there were a lot of sensitivities around using them. So we fell back on a new, more novel approach, I suppose, a more experimental approach maybe, using get scent tubes. These are polymer tubes that were developed by detection dog people for use with detection dogs. They absorb scent and release it slowly. So we put these in incubators with eggs. There are lots and lots of problems here. You can't see how much scent is on the tube. So we don't know when the scent is gone, when the scent is off the tube, you know, and training dogs in these low scents is a very, very critical kind of process. Initially, very, very positive results. We had them in with curlew eggs, with partridge eggs, just blank tubes in the incubator with no eggs, so we were able to discriminate all of these things. Very positive results initially, subsequently became very, very difficult, but ultimately we have the dog reliably searching or indicating on corncrake eggs, not partridge eggs, not curlew eggs, not blank tubes. So we have successfully demonstrated that the dog can discriminate corncrake egg scent from other scents. It was a tough process. And the third component was looking for dead birds. We came up here with John. We did a lot of trials on the mullet. Now our dogs are all, their bread and butter, I suppose, is looking for dead birds in wind farms. So they're used to generalized dead bird scent. And we had huge expectations of success there because we regularly get 90 to 100% efficiency with very small samples in very complex habitats. We were foiled again. This is our dog Min searching in these windrows, these grass rows. When we put samples under those grass rows, the dogs couldn't find them. Even subsequently, when we finished the trial and they hadn't found them, we brought them back, stuck them on top. Not a glimmer, nothing coming out of there. So we had to adjust those trials. That really shocked me. It really surprised me, really shocked me. They're cold, they're dense, they're heavy, the scent can't get out. So we changed the plan, or up the plan, I suppose. We put some carcasses out in a more realistic scenario where they were mowed over, fields that were due for mowing. We put the carcasses out, they were mowed over, they were passed through the conditioner into these windrows. And again, we had very, very high success rates again, and with that more natural scenario where the scent is maybe a bit more scattered through the windrows. That's the field that we searched. So you can see the carcasses that were put out in yellow, carcasses that were found in blue. There was a bit of movement from that mowing. The two down the end here, we actually saw before we started the trial, we saw a dog run away with something in its mouth from position 16, which we had marked. So that was a carcass that had been removed before we, and possibly 17 was also removed. We're not sure about that one. That's been indicating on a carcass in a windrow. It's actually a corncrake, a trial carcass. We found lots of frogs, lots of shrews, lots of other stuff, which was all of interest to us as well. Where to from here? We hope to trial on wild birds at some point. We need to establish whether the successes that we're having at the moment are transferable to a wild population. There's a lot of sensitivities around that. We need to demonstrate the effectiveness of what we've done so far. All of that process needs to be talked through, needs to be licensed. It's a complex process, but we feel it's very, very worthwhile. The cost-benefit analysis, from my point of view, is very high. If we have a dog that can find nests in intervention scenarios in particular, you know, we have a very, very, very good tool at our disposal. Thank you.
Super stuff, Ciaran. That was it. Very, very fast 18 minutes. Brilliant. Well done. Next up is Shelagh Parlene. She is a Corncrake project officer with RSPB Scotland on Skye. Yeah, Skye, close to my heart, Shelagh.
Absolutely. Okay, hello. It's a real pleasure and a privilege to be here at such a great conference and also amongst so many fellow Corncrake fanatics. Anyway, so this is a genuine Skye Corncrake. It's not a stock photograph, but it kind of excites me because it's in one of my patches. It's all I really need for reward. Anyway, how do we go forward? How do we go forward? Oh, there we go. So I've been working for the RSPB as the Corncrake Project Officer for 15 years now. When I started the job, it was tiny. It was 1 day a week to do habitat management, to do the Corncrake survey, and I think I had some spades and a wheelbarrow. That was it. I had no idea that a couple of years down the line, I would be herding cattle, I'd be fixing fences, I'd be bogged in a tractor. And yeah, every hour, it was in fact a corncrake hour, I'd been taken over. And the other thing is, I had no idea when I entered Planet Corncrake was just what a team effort it is to keep corncrakes on the map. That we've got the crofters and the farmers, first and foremost, but we've got the government agents and agencies who support that. And then we've got the agricultural agents who help the crofters navigate all the paperwork that's involved in the government agencies. We've got all the good people who live in the crofting townships and who visit, who just show an interest in the project. we've got the RSPB. We've got members, we've got staff, we've got volunteers, and we're a charity. I'll be passing a hat round later, actually, for supporting that. But it's big, you know, it's a big thing. But also, there's like-minded people like yourselves that just, yeah, it's just great that are fighting for the same thing. We all want the same end here. All of this feeds in, people are giving expertise and knowledge and time. They're working the land, they're reporting Corncrakes. It all feeds into the energy and the enthusiasm that keeps the Corncrake show on the road, really. And I think, yeah, Corncrakes just don't happen without that. And I know I'm not the first to say that today. It's a team effort. So I thought I'll tell you a little bit about my boggy bit of heaven here, the Isle of Skye. You maybe have heard of it. It's quite popular with tourists. But it's basically mountains and moorland. And it's a tiny, thin strip around the coast where you'll find the the green grassy bits. It's acidic soil, it's not very fertile, and it's a real uphill struggle to keep it in any way productive. But we've got crofting and farming, cattle and sheep production are the main things. Very few animals will actually be finished on the island, but there's a big lamb and calf production. And the cattle it's not a super intensive kind of industry on the island, but it's big enough that it's quite hard if you're trying to compromise for wildlife to incentivize that. With sheep, the sheep ownership the management tends to be that the in-by will be grazed year-round. So that's obviously just depleting Corncrake habitat for us. But I totally understand why you would do it if you have sheep. Then we also have our fair share, if not more than our fair share, of abandoned crofts. It's a common problem all over the place, but basically the fields become inundated with bracken, with rank grasses, with rush, and again, not suitable for Corncrakes. So it is also, there's a lot of coastline. Everything is very dispersed around here. It's linear rather than consolidated. And sadly, the land also, the other thing about Skye is that it's probably more valued as a house plot than agriculturally. Oops. So we're lucky still to host a small population of Corncrakes. This makes it look bigger than it actually is, probably, but it's the location that we've heard a calling mail over the last 5 years. So there'll be movement, as we've talked about. Andrea's talk and so forth have demonstrated there's a lot of movement, but they've got two kind of core areas up here, the Waternish Peninsula here and the Trotternish Peninsula on the right, where we consistently get birds, but we get scattering all over the rest of the island. So I think what I'm saying here is we've got a small population that's widely dispersed and relatively unpredictable about where they're going to show up. So the reason we have Corncrake habitat here at all, though, is thanks to the work that the crofters and the farmers are doing, and also, thank you, the crofters and the farmers who allow us to work on the land. So moving on to the agri-schemes, I think we all know that if the agri-schemes hadn't kicked in the 1990s, we would have lost our Corncrakes. That's the long and the short of it. So we worked very hard to get anybody who's interested into the scheme. And we work with our friends at the Scottish Agricultural Office under the Skye, Corncrake and Crofting Partnership. Difficult to get my head around. And we will basically try and get anybody eligible into the schemes where we can. Is that all I was going to say? So in terms of, I'll mention again that RSPB, we're a charity, but we've been funding Corncrake conservation in Skye since the 1990s. But we were very fortunate. We gained funding from the National Heritage Lottery Fund in 2020 for our Corncrake calling project. And that's basically boosted our ability to run schemes. And we started the Corncrake initiative. And I'm going to tell you a wee story I hadn't intended to. But John and the team came over to Skye last year, and they were saying, how's it going? I was saying, it's really great, apart from I've got this enormous problem. I've got too many people want to get into the Corncrake initiative. What am I going to do? How am I going to tell them I can't, say no to them? And they're saying, just find more money. That's what they said. So anyway, I went with my hat to the RSPB higher up, and fortunately they've delivered, and we've managed to cover 150 more hectares of land that was falling through the AIC scheme, Corncrake in by, to protect it in the summer. So I don't know what the moral of that story is. If you don't ask, you don't get. Maybe that's it. So the other thing we do is direct habitat management, and that again, it's back to the abandoned crofts. How many minutes do I have left now? 3, right, the abandoned crofts. Yeah, we do some direct habitat management, and cows are a big go-to, but there's more going on. Anyway, this is, I don't know if you can see him, a little Corncrake, one of my boys from last year, who's picked up on a trail camera. I mean, obviously, you don't see Corncrakes very much, you just have their calls to go on. And maybe in 2012 it was, when smartphones were just becoming a thing, I started making little recordings, hoping we could maybe identify individuals. Anyway, I got nowhere with it, but I was lucky a few years later to meet some clever people, John Howell and Robert Arnault, who devised ways to extract a call pattern from their recordings, and we started tracking the animals around the island. Some of them, the calls are very similar, but it's also a very manual technique. There's nothing automated or fancy about this. We're looking at the call patterns and see who matches up. But we're lucky here, again, to have a small, widely distributed population, because, you know, if one's calling in Staffin and one's calling in Trotternish, it's not the same bird. So we try and track our individuals that way. And it's had the surprising kind of outcome that it's been really popular. We got over 100 different recordings from the public last year, which Robert relentlessly analyses. You know, he gets them in at 2 in the morning and he starts analysing them to see who it is and what they're doing. But it's not just the birders that are sending us recordings, it's also the crofters. We get videos and voice memos from the crofters, and they're always keen to find out what their bird is doing, where he might have gone. So I think giving the Corncrakes a little bit of identity can help maybe with the ownership, which will obviously make caring for their habitat and protecting them just that little bit more of a real thing. So I'm going to finish here with this picture of a sunset. There was a Corncrake calling in the field there. Beautiful. But anyway, my main and my final point is that I have a lot of people to thank for keeping Corncrakes on the map on Skye. And most certainly, Corncrakes do not just happen. So thank you for listening.
Super, Simon. Maybe give you an extra minute there, Sheila, just because I'm biased. Next up is Alfie Cavaliero, who's working with the Corncrake Life Project on invertebrate biodiversity and Corncrake habitats at ATU.
Perfect. So, hi, I'm Alfie. I'm working on a master's project at the moment in ATU Galway under the supervisions of doctors John Kerry, Joanna Bryan, Dolores Byrne and James Moran. And today my talk is titled Beyond Corncrakes, Assessing the Contributions of Corncrake Conservation Measures on Biodiversity. So I'm just going to talk about what I've been doing for the past nearly 2 years for my master's, and then a little bit of what I'm going to be doing hopefully in the future. So the aim of my master's was to measure the contribution of ELCs, their type and quality, to conserve and increase invertebrate diversity and abundance, and hopefully use this data to inform decisions related to the establishment and restoration of ELCs. And then this should highlight the key factors that can influence the invertebrate prey diversity abundances in the ELCs for Corncrake. So just a little bit of background, it's been covered already. So when the Corncrakes arrive, they need a bit of cover to mitigate against the effects of winter grazing and mowing. So the project has created ELCs around these areas, and these allow for the Corncrake to hide from predation, nest, forage, and so on. And this management has been huge, and we all know the contributions it has to Corncrake breeding, but we wanted to see what was going on within the ELCs, what was going on with the invertebrate communities. And in particular, I wanted to target certain invertebrates that the Corncrake would be eating. So to do this, I wanted to look at their diet. So I did a literature review, and a few bits came up. As Chris mentioned earlier, there were some recipes I found along the way for corncrake pie, so that was great. But I was looking at using this review to see what was coming up. So we could see from the shape of their beak that they were pecking the vegetation from the soil surface. And from the videos earlier, you could see they were kind of just pecking everything and going away. And then we could see in the papers that there was diet consisted of beetles and their larvae, snails, spiders, slugs, earthworms, small invertebrates, fish. I've even seen pictures of them eating young birds. So they're very generalist, which is quite good for them, I guess. So to explore this, we wanted to see how could we sample these invertebrates. So to do this, we wanted to pick a method that wouldn't be too invasive. So we went with pitfall trapping because we wanted to look at the ground-dwelling invertebrates, as that was the majority of their diet. So to look at the ELCs, I divided them into 4 groups, depended on their composition. So we had natural regeneration, which were areas within the Corncrake Life project that weren't managed by the project. They were kind of areas of rank vegetation, lots of brambles, brambles, reeds, rushes. And these areas, they had birds in them sometimes, but we wanted to see what was going on. Then we had natural seed mix, hogweed, iris. Then we had nettles, majority nettles, and then wild bird cover. There were the kale, the oats, the potatoes. So within each ELC, we were placing pitfall traps, and we also placed them in the surrounding farmland, parallel to them, to see what was going on within the ELCs and compare them to the surrounding farmland. So we had 6 replicates of each. We had 24 sites spread evenly between Mayo and Donegal. And then we also recorded the vegetation characteristics, so the sward heights, density, soil moisture, to see if that was also affecting the invertebrates. So then the identification, so over 7 sample periods, I collected 1,008 pitfall traps. And then within all these traps, I identified all the invertebrates down to order at a minimum, and then for the beetles down to family, and for the ground beetles, the carabids, down to species level. And this is just some pictures of, I'm sorry, I skipped ahead. This is just some pictures of the beetles that I've come across. Sorry if you don't like big pictures of bugs. But you can see there's a huge difference between the genuses. You know, some are shiny iridescent, some are dull, different pronotum, you know, different shaped elytras. So it's not too bad to get them down to the genus. And then once you're trying to get them down to the species level, it can be a bit of a nightmare. Some of them can look quite similar. And it might be a few hairs on the leg, which is the difference between the species. So I was kind of squinting. It would have been nice to have a big screen like this to look at them on, but I was kind of squinting away at the microscope for a while. But and then the most common species was Pteris melanaris, which is this one over here. I think that was about 20%, 21% of all the carabids that I recorded, which is good because they're quite big ground beetles. And then I just have some preliminary results that I'll run over quickly. So I had over 110,000 invertebrates collected over the sample period last year, and 60% of these came from the ELCs. And then of those, 60% of all the invertebrates were beetles, and then of those beetles, 20% of them were, or 25% of them were the carabids, which I got 53 different species. And then you can see the ELCs, they had actually a greater species richness for carabids than surrounding farmland. So there was 51 species of carabid within the ELCs compared to 41 in the surrounding farmland. And then again, the average plot, the species richness per the average plot was higher in the ELCs than surrounding farmland. And then this is just the trend. I thought it looked nice, so I'd throw it up. Was the abundance over the sample period. So this kind of middle bit here is the highest. And that's kind of between mid-May to mid-July. And that peak in the middle is mid-June. And this trend was the same. So I had the carabids on top and all the invertebrates on the bottom, and it was the same between the two. So I was just starting to kind of slowly come towards that peak again. So then I created some box plots just to go over what we were seeing. So you could see the ELCs had a higher abundance of carabids on the top and invertebrates on the bottom, higher abundance per trap than the surrounding farmland. And then I wanted to break it down and see what was going on between the ELCs and which would be best. So it's quite interesting. The ELCs themselves, there wasn't a huge amount of variation in abundance. The nettles, wild bird cover, and natural seed mixes all seem to be quite similar. I think nettles had about 200 more beetles in them on average than the rest of them. So they were very similar. So that could be more down to habitat quality if there's a difference. But the interesting one was the natural regeneration areas, which you would assume the corncrake would be using, and they look, they're close to some of the ELCs, but they had a much lower abundance of both invertebrates and when down to caribids. So that kind of highlights the good work from the project and highlights maybe the importance of managing the abandoned lands as well, and not just letting them go for the invertebrate diversity. And then on the end, I also broke it up between Mayo and Donegal. So there's little bits of variation that I want to look into further, but again, it was similar trends. The ELCs kind of seem to be similar enough, and the natural regeneration plots were lower. And then just because the previous plots look quite similar, I want to see the relationship between the caribid abundance and invertebrate abundance, and you can see there's kind of a nice relationship there. So I want to kind of explore this further and see if I can use this caribid abundance and also use caribid species richness to look at invertebrate order richness within these areas and maybe focus on the caribids a bit more and save me a bit of time going through all the slugs and snails and worms. So I've still got a bit to do, so I've had to put all my results on hold at the moment because I'm kind of getting ready for this field season. But I want to look at the effects of environmental variables on invertebrate abundance and diversity, and then I want to see if the differences and highlight and investigate further the differences between Mayo and Donegal. And then I also want to explore caribid species traits within the ELCs and surrounding farmland to see which ELCs might have bigger beetles in them and their traits, nocturnal, diurnal, and all that fun stuff. So then just quickly to go over this field season, so I'm hoping to extend into a PhD and to expand on from this, and to expand on from what John said earlier, to think corncrake and act landscape. I want to think beetle and act landscape. So I want to explore this further on a landscape area. I want to assess habitat quality, landscape connectivity, other indices of diversity, and also with invertebrates, and see are areas with higher corncrake densities and areas of lower corncrake densities, is there a difference in the invertebrate communities, and see if we can use the caribidae further as indicators of ecological integrity for corncrake sites. So yeah, just thank you, and a quick thank you to all the field workers, the life team, Andrea, the supervisors and everyone. So thanks everybody.
Thanks, Alfie. I feel your pain, having just done an invertebrate study on relating to waders and poring over microscopes for hours on end. It's hard going. Well done. Next up, and last but not least, is Caitríona Nicali, Community Engagement Officer for Corncrake Life Project. I think you're going to do a general overview of community engagement in Corncrakes in Ireland. Fantastic.
Hi, Caitríona. I do the Donegal Community Engagement. Pat, who's not here, does the Mayo one. So I think a lot of the stuff has been covered in the socioeconomic presentation and different things too, but I suppose we recognise that the farmers and the landowners are the guardians, and we're just the privileged people who work with them. So we have not used a very corporate approach when we're trying to engage with farmers. We have used an active outreach model, knocked on doors, basically. And then we, one-to-one, when one person came on board, they would say, this is going well, they're okay to work with. So they referred each other. We showed up at everything. If there were committee meetings or parish meetings, we would be there. We didn't host our own town hall meetings, but we made ourselves available for everything else. A lot of the work as well has been about helping farmers and landowners and facilitating the understanding of complex regulations. And I suppose, as the Minister called it earlier, finding a dynamic harmony so that it was a mutually beneficial thing. There's been mediating, a lot of that, a lot of listening. we have also used a model which is an endeavour to make it more sustainable, where the ownership of the work, especially on the islands, which is very hard to access and to manage, is passed back to the islanders. So they're in charge. That we sit with them, we do the maps and lay out what the work is that needs to happen, but it belongs to the people again. We're very accessible. Everybody has our phone numbers at this stage. And these pictures show when we got to know people after a while, we started to have knowledge exchange events. And they started sort of formally, but as you can see, it became less formal, and it's good crack, and people look forward to it now, and they sort of inform each other on what's working and what could be tried. We also provide networking opportunities where we bring people maybe from one island to another so that they can all compare notes. The schools programme, we had help, Pat and I had help for this from RSPB and from FOTA. And last year, 2022 and 23, we had over 200 participants. And as you can see from this, it's an activity-based developmental programme, so they're always doing something. We're not lecturing. It involves ecology, farming practice, habitat creation, there's a field trip, there's wildflower propagation, it's interactive, a lot of arts and crafts, there's a quiz. So it's a 3-session thing, but all of these things, all of these activities are now available online for anybody to use. So, you know, we've farmed it out so the teachers and the schools themselves can use all these resources. Public awareness, I mean, the normal stuff, you know, the media, newsletters, local and national things, radio, TV, whatever is needed. And then, of course, there's social media. John does most of that. Cards in Caitríona is another outreach initiative where we invite members of the public to gather seeds and send them to us. So that's been very successful. This is our project launch, and from this you can't, well, the writing's too small, but there's 2 things that I suppose are worth highlighting. And the Minister and Pippa Hackett's commentary on it was that it was all about collaborative farmer engagement, and it works for farmers, corncrakes and nature. Community events, 9 last year, just to maximise the potential for tourism and to educate again. And indirectly then we tag along onto other people's social media. This is a Planal Changa Cloyhanila, and this is Maharorthy, and they all say it's about finding a sustainable future and collaboration and stuff like that. It's in Irish, so this was a trip we took where we took the Costa Forbacha and Ishbofinia to meet the Minister in person to try and address some of the legacy issues, and it went a long way to finding solutions for that. Some of the many, many community activities that we show up for, agricultural shows, the Dawn Chorus, Tidy Towns, yada yada, loads of those. And Sinead, I suppose the big thing is we hold the people we work with in very high regard, and we have a lot of respect for the way they've done things and kept the Corncrake. So, Sinead, thank you.
Lovely work, Caitríona, and you've just given us 3 minutes to take some questions, so that'd be great. So the first one should be to you, really. Has anybody got any questions for any of the speakers this afternoon? None at all. Okay. God, it must be getting near the end of the day. Sorry, I have a question. No, I'm not going to ask any questions and delay everybody. I've got some other things to say. I've got to do a little synopsis of the day, and I'm going to keep it pretty brief because we're already pretty close to time. I think I've got three take-homes from today in the kind of broadest sense. One, the importance of that community landowner conservation triad. Communications involved in that to achieve cooperation. You know, it's been mentioned by the Minister right at the start, it's been mentioned by Chris, by John, by Caroline, and everybody, and then right at the end with Caitríona's stuff, you can see the value of it. Essential stuff, really. And it speaks to a lot of the kind of current themes in unblocking the blockages in conservation. Secondly, the importance of range and the challenges associated with it. We've heard things like examining that 250-metre buffer and the applicability of it and how relevant that is. And I think Chris talked about the 10 km square occupancy and in Scotland. And I remember in my time, you know, we increased the Corncrake population about 30% when I was in RSPB, and yet we lost something like 3 or 4 10-kilometre squares in that time in occupancy. So incredibly important if we want to maintain the range, and now we're seeing it in Belgium, Switzerland, France. You've heard about it today, that you know, these populations that are becoming more isolated, you know, it brings great vulnerability, but you've also heard some of the potential solutions to that around things like translocation, so, and head starting and such. And then lastly, the value of knowledge transfer. You know, we've had knowledge transferred from Scotland to Ireland, from Ireland to Scotland, and I think we need to now be helping those in Belgium and Switzerland and France as well, with the knowledge that we have that we can bring to those, and also get new approaches that they can develop. And we're hearing about lots of the new approaches we've heard about today, things like, you know, bioacoustics and so on. There's a lot to bring to the table on this, and that knowledge transfer, which is what today has been all about, really. We've got a lot more to talk about tonight, no doubt, in the bar, and undoubtedly tomorrow, and when we're out listening to the birds tonight. So thanks, everybody, for your input today. Thanks to all the speakers. Thanks to the Minister for his warm words right at the start of the day. And I look forward to hearing some birds tonight. We're not quite finished. Can I ask all of the Corncrake life team to come up on stage? John, you might have to round them up.
I always have
that are here. I know they're not all here, but as many as possible. Quickly, we've not got all day. Absolutely. Is that us? Come on, folks. Come on, file in behind. Don't be shy. Come on. All the way across. Okay, now can I ask Louise Muir and Claire Bird from the RSPB to come up as well, and I'll hand over the microphone to you guys if that's okay.
Well, we've just got a little thank you for you. So it's been a real privilege to be part of this international conversation. We're very good at alcoholic beverages on the west coast of Scotland. So there's a little present of Bunnahabhain whiskey from Islay, because it would seem wrong if we didn't, and some
even littler gifts from the North US Distillery. Our Crofton Coast gin.
So you may be able to drink it all at once. I've no idea what you're like, but we'll find out tonight. But we're really looking forward to working with you in the future and finding a future for Corncrakes. So thank you. Here you go. I'll pass it this one around here. I'll take them here. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you.
Do you want to make a response, or are you okay? No response from the team. They want to get some glasses for that whiskey, I think. Highly recommended. Thanks all.
Thank you very much.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
I'll let you go. Right, last few bits of housekeeping before you disappear. I've got to remind you all to check out prior to the site visit tomorrow and be at the bus no later than 8:50, okay? So 10 to 9, be at the bus at the front. Check your packs for which bus you're on or on the board over there. Please leave a few comments. It's very bare up there, if you can. And then tonight, also 10 to 9, be out front for the evening Corncrake tour. Correct? 10 to 9? Out front, and we'll get on a bus. I think, is that a bus? Yeah? Yeah. Get on a bus and head to a secret site to be revealed in the dark later on. Yeah. Well, I mean, I assume there's Corncrakes involved, so you know we're safe. You know, good stuff. So enjoy your dinner, everybody. Dinner is at 6:30. I'll see you either there or somewhere in the dark tonight. Fantastic. Thank you.